You really think a janitor can read Japanese?
I think I can, sir.
For one sharp second, the entire VIP conference room fell silent. Then someone laughed. It started with a short breath from the far end of the polished walnut table, then spread around the room like a stain. Men in tailored suits exchanged amused looks. A woman in a pearl necklace lowered her eyes, smiling into her glass of water. Someone whispered, "Unbelievable." Maya stood near the glass door in her dark blue cleaning uniform, the yellow caution sign still folded under her arm. She was 26, a black woman with tired brown eyes, a neat bun, and hands roughened by bleach, soap, and years of work nobody thanked her for. In Whitmore Medical Center, people noticed the shine she left behind, but rarely the person who made it. Across from her sat Grant Whitmore, the billionaire owner of the hospital. He was a tall, silver-haired man in his late 50s, dressed in a navy suit that looked more expensive than Maya's yearly rent. His name was on the building, on the donor wall, and on every glossy brochure promising compassionate innovation. But there was nothing compassionate in the way he looked at her now. Beside him stood Bradley Cole, the hospital's chief operations officer. Bradley was in his early 40s, clean-shaven, handsome in a cold way, with perfect blonde hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He held the Japanese medical partnership file like it was a toy he could wave above Maya's head. "Maybe we should let her try," Bradley said, grinning. "After all, she probably cleans near the international wing." More laughter. Maya looked down at the floor, not because she was ashamed, but because she had learned that looking powerful men in the eye could cost a woman like her job. And she needed this job. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She didn't have to check it to know who it was. Her younger brother, Eli Brooks, 17 years old, probably sitting outside their mother's hospital room again. Eli was tall and thin, with serious eyes that made him look older than he was. He should have been worrying about prom, basketball tryouts, or college applications. Instead, he kept texting Maya about dialysis bills, rent notices, and whether he should drop out of school to work full-time. She had told him no, every time. Their mother, Denise Brooks, was only 51, but kidney disease had carved deep lines into her face. She had once worked as a school cafeteria manager, the kind of woman who remembered every child's favorite meal. Now she spent most of her days weak, swollen, and waiting for treatments Maya could barely afford. That was why the number Grant had announced still rang in Maya's head. "My salary for one day," he had said moments earlier, tossing the Japanese file onto the table. $29,000. Translate this before sunrise, and it's yours. $29,000. Enough to stop the eviction notice taped to Maya's apartment door. Enough to cover Denise's overdue treatment. Enough to keep Eli in school. At the end of the table, Dr. Helen Price adjusted her glasses and studied Maya with a trace of curiosity. She was the hospital's chief medical officer, a composed woman in her 60s, with silver-streaked hair and a reputation for being brilliant, but cautious. Unlike the others, she wasn't laughing. Grant tapped the Japanese document with one finger. "This file came from Kurosawa Biotech," he said. "If we don't understand it by morning, they may take their trial partnership to another hospital." Maya's eyes flickered toward the page. She recognized the header immediately. Advanced Renal Regeneration Trial. A kidney treatment program. Her breath caught. Bradley noticed. His smile sharpened. "What's wrong, Maya?" he asked, saying her name as if it surprised him that he knew it. "See something you recognize?" Maya swallowed. For years, she had hidden what she knew, hidden the Japanese her father had taught her, hidden the medical terms she had studied before life dragged her out of nursing school, hidden every part of herself that might make people uncomfortable. But on that page was more than a business deal. It was a door. and behind that door might be the one chance her family had left. Maya lifted her eyes, carefully this time. Grant Whitmore stared back, still amused, still certain she would fail. Maya set the folded caution sign beside her cart. Then she reached for the file. Maya's fingers hovered over the Japanese file, but before she touched it, the room around her seemed to blur. The polished table, the laughing executives, Bradley's smug face, Grant Whitmore's cold stare. All of it faded behind a memory she had tried to keep buried. Years before she ever wore a cleaning uniform, Maya Brooks had worn white nursing scrubs as a student at Malcolm X College. Back then, her professors called her one of the sharpest students in her class. She could memorize anatomy terms after one reading, explain symptoms clearly to frightened patients, and move through clinical training with the calm focus of someone born to heal. Her Japanese had come from her father, Samuel Brooks, a former military medical interpreter who had served in Okinawa. Samuel was a broad-shouldered black man with gentle hands, a deep laugh, and a habit of labeling household objects in English and Japanese so Maya would learn without realizing she was studying. He believed language was not just communication, it was survival. When Maya was 12, he sat with her at the kitchen table, pointing to medical phrases in an old notebook. "Remember this, baby," he told her. "Language can save a life faster than medicine when nobody understands the patient." By 16, Maya could translate basic medical forms, discharge instructions, and patient questions. Sometimes Samuel brought home old training manuals, and Maya practiced reading them while her mother, Denise, cooked dinner and teased them for turning the kitchen into a classroom. Denise Brooks had been warm, practical, and endlessly proud of her daughter. She told everyone at church that Maya would become the first nurse in the family. Maya believed it too. She had imagined herself walking hospital halls with a badge on her chest, not a mop in her hand. Then Samuel died. It was sudden, brutal, and unfair. A heart attack in the middle of a rainy Tuesday morning. One moment he was leaving for work with coffee in a travel mug. The next, Maya was standing in an emergency room hallway, watching doctors avoid her eyes. The bills arrived before the grief had even settled. Funeral costs, ambulance fees, old debts, rent. Denise tried to stay strong, but within a year, her kidneys began failing. Dialysis appointments replaced family dinners. Medication bottles filled the bathroom shelf. Maya's nursing textbooks stayed unopened on her desk until she finally packed them into a cardboard box. She never told anyone at Whitmore Medical Center about that part of her life. Not the professors who had praised her, not the patient she had comforted during clinical rotations, not the medical documents she had translated for immigrant families who were too afraid to ask doctors questions. In that hospital, people saw her uniform and decided the rest of her story for her. So Maya let them. It was safer to be underestimated than to be noticed by the wrong person. Inside her pocket, hidden beneath a folded cleaning checklist, was Samuel's old watch. The leather band was cracked, and the silver face was scratched from years of use. On the back, in tiny engraved letters, were the words he had left her. "Never let them decide your worth." Maya pressed her thumb against the watch, feeling its familiar edge. Then she looked at the Japanese file on the table and remembered exactly who she had been before life forced her to disappear. Maya pulled her hand back before anyone could notice how badly it trembled. The name printed across the top of the file was Kurosawa Biotech, a Japanese medical company known for experimental kidney treatments. Grant Whitmore tapped the cover with impatience, explaining to the board that Kurosawa wanted to bring a new renal regeneration trial to the United States. If Whitmore Medical Center secured the partnership, the hospital could become the first private facility in the Midwest to offer it. Investors would flood in. News cameras would come. Grant's name would be praised again as a symbol of medical innovation. To everyone in that room, the file meant money, reputation, and power. Bradley Cole opened his laptop and projected a machine translation onto the large screen. The English sentences appeared broken and awkward, full of errors that made Maya's stomach tighten. Medical terms were twisted into nonsense. Ethical requirements were reduced to vague suggestions. Patient access guidelines were translated as optional admission preferences. Bradley stood beside the screen as if he had personally solved the problem. "The basic meaning is clear," he said confidently. "Kurosawa wants speed, exclusivity, and flexibility. We can work with that." Maya lowered her eyes, but every wrong phrase burned in her mind. Dr. Helen Price leaned forward, her expression troubled. "Bradley, this translation looks unstable. These sections involve patient selection. We cannot base a multi-million-dollar agreement on software output." Bradley smiled at her like she was being sentimental. "Helen, with respect, this is business language, not bedside poetry." Grant did not correct him. Several board members nodded, more interested in projected revenue than patient safeguards. Maya moved quietly to the glass wall and began wiping fingerprints that were barely there. From that position, she could see both the Japanese pages and the flawed English version glowing on the screen. Then Bradley reached the section that made Maya's breath catch. He claimed Kurosawa allowed Whitmore Medical Center to prioritize financially qualified candidates for the trial. But the original Japanese said something very different. It required the hospital to reserve access for underinsured and low-income patients with severe kidney disease. The clause was not a suggestion. It was a moral condition of the partnership. If Bradley's version became the official interpretation, wealthy patients would move to the front of the line, and the people the trial was designed to help would disappear from the list entirely. Maya thought of Noah Carter. He was 8 years old, small for his age, with bright eyes that stayed hopeful even when dialysis left him exhausted. His mother, Tasha Carter, was a single parent who worked double shifts at a grocery warehouse and still arrived at the hospital with a smile for her son. Maya often saw them during her night shift. When Noah couldn't sleep, she slipped comic books into his room, pretending they had been left behind in the waiting area. He loved superheroes, especially the ones nobody expected to win. Bradley continued speaking, smoothing cruelty into professional language. "This gives us room to select candidates who strengthen the hospital's public image and financial outcome." Maya's fingers tightened around the cleaning cloth. Across the room, the executives nodded as though he had said something wise. Grant glanced toward the file, then toward the revenue chart, and Maya understood the danger clearly. This was not only a bad translation, it was a doorway to injustice, and if she stayed silent, Noah and children like him might never even know they had been erased. That night, after the boardroom emptied and the executives disappeared behind private elevators, Maya remained on the VIP floor with her cleaning cart. The hospital had grown quiet, but not peaceful. Machines hummed behind closed walls. Security lights blinked along the hallway. Somewhere below, nurses moved between patient rooms, carrying real burdens, while powerful people upstairs discussed lives as if they were line items. Maya stood outside the conference room for several minutes, staring through the glass. Bradley's machine translation still glowed on the screen, wrong enough to harm people, polished enough to fool the board. She should have walked away. That was what survival had taught her. Keep your head down, do the job. Don't give anyone a reason to notice you. But the image of Noah Carter stayed with her. His thin wrists, his superhero comics, the way he once asked if doctors ever picked brave kids first. Maya unlocked the conference room with her cleaning badge and stepped inside. On the table lay printed copies of the Japanese file, marked with Bradley's notes. He had circled profit projections in red ink, but left the patient access clauses untouched. Maya took a legal pad from the supply cabinet and began writing. She did not translate the entire file. That would expose too much too fast. Instead, she corrected the sections that mattered most: patient eligibility, insurance protections, ethical oversight, and the requirement that low-income candidates could not be pushed aside for wealthy donors. Her handwriting was neat but hurried. Under each correction, she included page numbers and brief explanations in plain English. At the bottom of the final page, she hesitated, then signed only 2 words: night nurse. By the time Maya returned home, the sky over Chicago was beginning to lighten. Eli was awake at the kitchen table, a half-finished homework assignment open beside a stack of overdue bills. Eli Brooks was 17, sharp-minded and protective, with the quiet anger of a boy forced to grow up too quickly. He looked at Maya's wrinkled uniform and red eyes. "You worked all night again," he said. It was not a question. Maya tried to brush past him, but he blocked her gently. "Maya, what are you hiding?" She told him it was nothing. He did not believe her. At the hospital the next morning, the executive floor buzzed with confusion. Maya pushed her cart slowly past the boardroom as Grant Whitmore held up her pages. "Who wrote these?" he demanded. Dr. Helen Price was already reading them, her face pale with realization. "These corrections are medically precise," she said, "and the Japanese interpretation is far better than what we had yesterday." For one dangerous second, Maya felt hope. Maybe truth could enter a room even if she could not. Then Bradley stepped forward. "I did," he said smoothly. Maya stopped moving. Bradley picked up the pages and gave a modest smile. "I stayed late reviewing the machine translation. I didn't want to embarrass anyone until I was certain." He turned the last page over before Grant could see the signature. When no one was looking, Bradley dragged his thumb across the words, "night nurse," smearing the ink. Then he folded that corner beneath the stack. Grant's expression changed from irritation to approval. "That's the initiative I expect from leadership," he said. "Good work, Bradley." A few board members nodded. Dr. Price looked uncertain, but she said nothing. Maya stood beside the trash bin, invisible again, her throat tight and her hands steady only because they had learned to keep working through pain. Bradley's eyes found hers for half a second. His smile was small, private, and cruel. He had stolen her truth before it even had a voice. Maya wanted to speak. She wanted to say those words were hers, that Noah's chance and many others depended on the real translation. But then her phone vibrated with a message from Eli. "Landlord called again. We need to talk tonight. Please don't do anything dangerous." Maya looked at Bradley, accepting praise for her work, and understood the trap. If she stepped forward too soon, she could lose her job, her mother's care, and Eli's future. So she lowered her eyes, pushed the cart down the hallway, and carried the name night nurse like a secret flame burning under her ribs. Bradley's suspicion began with one small mistake. During the next afternoon's strategy meeting, he stood beside the medical display screen, pretending to explain a Japanese term from the Kurosawa file. "This phrase here," he said, pointing with a laser pen, "means selective donor pathway." Maya was emptying the trash near the back wall when the words left his mouth. She did not speak. She barely moved. But her eyes lifted for half a second, just long enough for Bradley to notice. The real phrase meant protected patient access. It was the exact opposite of what he had said. After the meeting, Bradley followed her into the service hallway. "You understood that, didn't you?" he asked. Maya kept pushing her cart, the wheels squeaking against the tile. Bradley stepped in front of her, forcing her to stop. "You know, Maya, most people in your position are smart enough not to look too interested in executive business." His voice was calm, but his smile had turned sharp. Maya lowered her gaze and said she was only trying to finish her shift. Bradley watched her for a long moment, as if studying a locked door he intended to break open. That evening, when Maya returned from cleaning the dialysis waiting area, her locker door was slightly open. Her folded sweater had been shoved aside. Her spare shoes were on the floor. The small notebook where she had written Japanese medical phrases was missing from its usual pocket. Then she saw Bradley, standing near the vending machine, holding her father's old watch between two fingers. The cracked leather band dangled carelessly from his hand. Maya's chest tightened. That watch was the last thing Samuel Brooks had worn before the morning he died. "Interesting keepsake," Bradley said. "And these notes? Japanese medical vocabulary, patient eligibility terms, insurance language? Strange hobby for a janitor." Maya reached for the watch, but Bradley pulled it away. "Careful. Unauthorized documents, suspicious behavior, access to confidential materials. I could make this very ugly." Maya's voice stayed low. "Give it back." Bradley leaned closer. "If you embarrass me, I'll make sure you're fired before your next paycheck. And when your employment record says misconduct, your mother's care assistance disappears with it." He was not finished. Bradley had done his homework. He mentioned her overdue rent, the landlord's warnings, and the hospital charity program that helped cover part of Denise's dialysis. "People like you survive because people like me allow paperwork to keep moving," he said. "I can stop that paperwork." Then he smiled again. "I can also make a phone call to your landlord. Let him know the hospital may not keep you much longer. I wonder how fast he changes the locks then." Maya stood still, burning with humiliation, while Bradley slipped the watch into his jacket pocket. Later, while collecting recycling outside Bradley's office, Maya saw a printed draft on his desk. It was not the version she had corrected. Bradley had rewritten the patient selection section again, changing protected access into premium candidate prioritization. The meaning was clear. He intended to turn Kurosawa's treatment program into a showcase for wealthy donors, board members' relatives, and patients with expensive insurance plans. Poor families would not be rejected openly. They would be buried under review delays, financial screening, and limited suitability criteria. Cruelty sounded cleaner when written by administrators. That same night, Maya found Tasha Carter crying beside the vending machines near pediatrics. Tasha was in her early 30s, with tired eyes, a warehouse uniform under her coat, and hands that shook from too much caffeine and too little sleep. Noah had taken a sudden turn. His blood pressure had spiked during treatment, and doctors were discussing whether he was stable enough for future trial consideration. "They said he might not qualify," Tasha whispered. "But they won't tell me why." "He's 8, Maya. He still thinks superheroes always arrive in time." Maya looked through the glass window of Noah's room. The little boy lay small, beneath a blue blanket, one comic book open beside his pillow. Bradley had stolen her work, threatened her family, and twisted a medical partnership into a gate only the rich could enter. But seeing Noah's mother break down changed something inside Maya. Fear was still there. So was the rent notice, her mother's dialysis bill, Eli's worried face, and her father's missing watch. Yet beneath all of it, a harder truth rose in her chest. If she stayed silent now, Bradley would not just defeat her, he would make her part of what he was doing. The next morning, the VIP boardroom was colder than Maya remembered. Every chair was filled. Grant Whitmore sat at the head of the table, his silver hair perfectly combed, his expression sharp with impatience. Dr. Helen Price sat 2 seats away, a folder open in front of her, her eyes moving between Bradley and the original Japanese file. Across the screen, representatives from Kurosawa Biotech waited for the formal review to begin. Maya stood behind the refreshment cart with a silver pitcher of water, her uniform pressed, her face calm, and her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. Bradley Cole stood beside the screen like a man already accepting applause. He wore a charcoal suit, a blue tie, and the same polished confidence he used to hide every lie. After careful review, he began. Kurosawa Biotech's terms are favorable and flexible. Their patient selection language allows Whitmore Medical Center to prioritize candidates with stronger financial capacity and long-term institutional value. A few investors nodded. Dr. Price stiffened. Maya's hand tightened around the water pitcher. That was not what the document said. Bradley was not misunderstanding anymore. He was choosing the lie. Outside the glass wall, Eli Brooks had arrived, breathless from the train station, still wearing his school backpack. He was not supposed to be there. Maya had told him to stay away from the hospital, but fear had pulled him across the city. He had seen Bradley near his sister's locker the night before, seen the look on Maya's face when she came home without their father's watch. Now he stood near a decorative plant by the conference room entrance, half hidden from the security desk, his phone raised low against his chest, recording through the glass. Bradley advanced to the technical section of the presentation. The procedure here, which I'll approximate as Ketsueki Saisei filter protocol, appears to give us discretion over treatment timing and dosage adjustments based on administrative readiness. Maya nearly dropped the pitcher. The phrase was not about administrative discretion. It referred to a blood purification calibration process that had to be followed exactly before the regeneration therapy could begin. A wrong interpretation could delay treatment, corrupt trial data, or put fragile patients at risk. Maya saw Noah's face in her mind, small against a hospital pillow, waiting for heroes who might never arrive. "Stop," Maya said. The word was quiet, but it cut through the room. Bradley turned first, annoyed. "Excuse me?" Maya set the pitcher down carefully. Her hands were shaking now, but her voice did not. She looked at the screen, then at the Japanese document. In clear, fluent Japanese, she corrected the term Bradley had butchered, giving the proper pronunciation and meaning. The Kurosawa representatives on the video screen went still. Dr. Price slowly removed her glasses. Grant Whitmore stared as if the cleaning woman behind the water cart had suddenly become someone else entirely. Bradley's face hardened. "This is absurd. She has no authority to speak in this meeting." "No," Maya said, turning toward Grant. "But I have enough understanding to know your chief operations officer just lied to everyone in this room." The silence that followed was absolute. Grant leaned forward, the mockery gone from his face. "You speak Japanese?" Maya lifted her chin. Japanese, English, and enough medical truth to know he just lied to everyone in this room. From outside the glass, Eli kept recording, his hand trembling as he watched his sister finally become visible. Maya stepped closer to the conference table, no longer standing behind the water cart like part of the furniture. Every face in the room followed her. Bradley's mouth opened, but no words came out fast enough to stop her. Maya pointed to the Japanese document on the screen and spoke clearly. Kurosawa Biotech is not giving this hospital permission to choose only wealthy patients. The contract requires Whitmore Medical Center to reserve at least 40% of trial access for low-income and underinsured patients with severe kidney disease. Dr. Helen Price reached for the printed file, her hands moving quickly now. "Show me the section," she said. Maya did not hesitate. Page 12, second paragraph. The phrase Bradley translated as financially qualified candidates actually means patients lacking sufficient private coverage but meeting medical urgency criteria. Dr. Price read the line, then looked up slowly, her face pale with anger. She's right. Around the table, investors shifted in their seats. Grant Whitmore's jaw tightened as the meaning settled over the room. Bradley finally found his voice. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "She had unauthorized access to confidential documents. She is a janitor, not a translator, not a doctor, and certainly not someone qualified to advise this board." He pointed at Maya as if accusation alone could shrink her back into silence. "She stole documents from this room and is trying to sabotage a deal she doesn't understand." Maya's stomach clenched, but she did not look away. For the first time, Bradley sounded afraid. A voice came from the video screen. "Mr. Cole, I would advise caution before you insult her again." The speaker was Dr. Kenji Watanabe, Kurosawa Biotech's senior medical liaison. He was a dignified Japanese man in his 60s, with calm eyes, neatly combed gray hair, and the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed without raising his voice. His gaze moved from Bradley to Maya. "Miss Brooks, may I ask, did your father serve as a medical interpreter in Okinawa?" Maya froze. "Yes," she answered softly. "Samuel Brooks." Dr. Watanabe's expression changed. "I knew Samuel. He helped my surgical unit communicate with American military doctors during a crisis that saved many lives. He wore an old silver watch with an inscription on the back." Bradley's face lost color. Dr. Watanabe continued, "When your brother sent a message to our public ethics line this morning with a video clip, I recognized that watch in Mr. Cole's hand." The glass door opened behind them. Eli stepped inside, nervous but determined, his phone gripped tightly. "I recorded him threatening my sister," he said. His voice shook, but he held it steady enough. "And taking our father's watch from her locker." Security pulled up the footage at Dr. Price's demand. The room watched Bradley enter the staff locker area, search Maya's belongings, remove the watch, and later edit the patient access language on his office computer. Then Eli's video played. Bradley's voice threatening Maya's job, her mother's care assistants, and their apartment. Dr. Watanabe looked directly at Grant. "Kurosawa included those ethical clauses as a test. We wanted to know whether Whitmore Medical Center would protect vulnerable patients or erase them for profit. Mr. Cole failed that test. Miss Brooks passed it." Silence filled the boardroom, heavier than any argument. Grant turned toward Bradley, his face hard and unreadable. "You're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Legal will review your conduct for fraud and contract interference." 2 guards entered. Bradley protested, but no one moved to defend him. As he was led out past the same executives who had once laughed at Maya, his expensive shoes scraped loudly against the polished floor. Maya stood still, breathing through the shock of seeing the man who had hunted her, finally powerless. Minutes later, Dr. Price returned from the hallway with Tasha Carter at her side. Tasha's eyes were red from crying, but this time her tears were different. "Noah qualifies," Dr. Price said gently. "He is being placed on the protected access list today." Tasha covered her mouth, then crossed the room and wrapped Maya in a trembling hug. "You saved my boy," she whispered. Maya closed her eyes as the whole room watched. This time, nobody laughed. This time, they saw her. Grant Whitmore did not apologize immediately. Men like him rarely did anything immediately, unless profit demanded it. He stood at the head of the boardroom, staring at the empty doorway where Bradley had just been escorted out, then at Maya Brooks, who still held herself like someone expecting the floor to vanish beneath her feet. But this time, the room was different. The executives who had laughed at her avoided her eyes. Dr. Helen Price stood beside her, not behind her. And on the screen, Dr. Kenji Watanabe waited calmly for Grant to understand the new terms of power. "Kurosawa Biotech will continue the partnership," Dr. Watanabe said. on one condition. Miss Brooks will serve as patient equity liaison for the trial. She will oversee access requirements, translation accuracy, and patient protection standards. Grant's jaw tightened. Everyone knew he hated being cornered. But losing Kurosawa would cost the hospital hundreds of millions. More than that, the scandal Bradley created could destroy the hospital's reputation. Grant reached for his checkbook with visible reluctance. "My salary for one day," he said, as promised. He wrote the check and pushed it across the table. $29,000. Maya looked at it, then at him. "And my father's watch." Dr. Price placed the watch gently into Maya's hand. By sunset, Bradley Cole's name had been removed from the hospital directory. Legal opened an investigation into medical document fraud, contract interference, and retaliation against an employee. The next morning, Grant stood in the hospital auditorium before nurses, janitors, cafeteria workers, physicians, and board members. Cameras from local news stations lined the back wall. He did not sound warm, but he sounded defeated, and sometimes that was enough. Whitmore Medical Center failed to recognize talent within its own walls, he said. Miss Maya Brooks prevented a serious ethical breach. Today, we are establishing the Samuel Brooks Patient Access Fund to protect treatment opportunities for vulnerable patients. For the first time, Maya heard her father's name spoken in that hospital with honor. The money changed everything quickly. Maya paid the overdue rent before the landlord could change the locks. She covered Denise Brooks's treatment balance and moved her mother to a better care plan. Denise cried when Maya told her Eli would not be dropping out of school. Eli pretended not to cry, then hugged his sister so tightly she could barely breathe. "I told you," he whispered. "You were never just cleaning floors." Maya laughed through tears, holding their father's watch between them like a promise returned. 6 months later, Maya had an office on the same executive floor where she once emptied trash bins. The nameplate on the door read, Maya Brooks, Patient Equity Liaison. She had also returned to nursing school part-time, determined to finish what grief and poverty had interrupted. Her desk held two things she looked at every morning: Samuel's old silver watch and a crayon drawing from Noah Carter. In the picture, Maya wore blue nurse scrubs and a cape. Underneath, in uneven child handwriting, Noah had written, "Thank you for seeing me." Noah's treatment was working. He was gaining weight, smiling again, and already arguing with nurses about superhero rankings. Maya's new role became larger than anyone expected. She created the Hidden Hands Initiative, a hospital-wide program that allowed support staff to submit prior education, certifications, language skills, and professional experience for review. The first promotions stunned the board. A night security guard named Dr. Adewale Okafor, once a licensed physician in Nigeria, became a clinical training coordinator after passing credential evaluations. A kitchen worker named Rosa Martinez, who had studied pharmacy in Puerto Rico, moved into medication safety support. A quiet transport aide who spoke 4 languages became an interpreter for frightened families who had once nodded through instructions they did not understand. Grant Whitmore did not become a saint. He still watched numbers before emotions. He still spoke of equity in terms of retention rates, investor confidence, and reduced legal exposure. But he had learned one expensive lesson. Dismissing invisible people could cost him more than listening to them. And when Maya entered the boardroom for the first quarterly review of the Kurosawa trial, every person at the table stood. Some out of respect, some out of guilt, some because Grant stood first. Maya did not smile cruelly. She did not need to. Her revenge was not humiliation. It was authority. It was truth. It was the protected patient list with Noah Carter's name on it. It was her mother alive, her brother in school, Bradley under investigation, and her father's legacy written into hospital policy. She placed her notes on the table, rested the silver watch beside them, and looked around the room that had once laughed at her. "Good morning," Maya said. "Let's talk about who this hospital is finally learning to see." Maya's story reminds us that prejudice does not always shout. Sometimes it hides in a laugh, in a job title, in the way people look past someone as if they have nothing to offer. But Maya proved that your value is not decided by your uniform, your skin color, your bank account, or the place others try to put you. The people who mocked her had power, titles, and money. But she had truth, courage, and the strength to stand up when silence would have been easier. So let me ask you, have you ever been underestimated by someone who judged you before they truly knew you? Would you have stayed quiet like Maya almost did? Or would you have spoken up and risked everything for what was right? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and stay with us for more powerful stories about justice, courage, and people who finally prove their true worth.